Hi, it's Liz Granberg Jerome again, working on This Way and That, the Jacob's Cross blocks for month 1 of the second Saturday shop sampler for Quilters Paradise. And now we've gotten to the point to where we're assembling the individual blocks. And I have laid out an entire block, and I have my diagram here on the pattern that shows how the blocks are laid out. And I would start sewing and sew this seam and this seam and this seam, and then I would come back and add this piece. This would be finger pressed out, and this would go on, and the same here, to make the 3 complete rows, which I happen to have a set of right here that show the rows as they're sewn together. Now if we flip these over, they've been pressed. You'll notice that the top and bottom rows are pressed, the seams are pressed to the center block, and the center row is pressed to the outer block. Then these are now ready to sew together, and when you have them done that way, you'll see that your seams nest. They're going in opposite directions when you sew them together. So when you sew this row, I would put a pin at each seam to keep them matched up. More if you feel comfortable with it. Sew this seam and then press it out, and then come back and do the same thing here. And now I have them turned around, and this one goes here, and it would go on and get pressed or get pinned and sewn here to make the complete block. Now, because we're assembling 4 blocks together, I recommend, and here's 2 separate blocks, they're both the same, but if you notice, these are the long seams that are attached to the rows. If you look at the individual rows, one set is sewn with the outer blocks pressed in and the inner block out. The other one has the outer rows pressed out and the inner one pressed in. That way, when you go to sew those rows together, let's see if I can pick out the right direction here, because I know it worked. There we go. Your seams are all pressed in the opposite direction to sew those 2 together. And when they're sewn, your one little 4 patch that had a white in the center, so you have all yellows and then a yellow and a white, those whites go in the middle of the block. And when you sew those together again, those seams are nested and going in opposite directions because you pressed one block one direction and the other block the opposite direction. And you make 2 rows like that because it's going to be 4 blocks total. And when you get the other block sewn onto it, then everything should nest. I would press this seam here on both sets of 2 blocks open, and the long seam is going to get pressed open when you sew the 4 blocks together. And that is how you make Jacob's Cross. And we're learning. This is our first time doing this, so patience is appreciated, and we'll see you next month with another block pattern.